On America Can We Talk, I talk about election integrity, border security, healthcare freedom, race relations, energy and tax policy, education policy, free speech and assembly, freedom of religion, and all other issues that touch on the God-given right of every American to life, liberty, and the pursuit of their version of happiness. Stay tuned.
You preach your tolerance, but lecture me. Is there no end to your own hypocrisy? Your God is power, you have no shame. Your only interest is political gain. You hide your eyes and refuse to listen. You play your game.
Coming up next, America Can We Talk with your host, Debbie-Georgatos.
I've got a feeling that the time.
And hello and welcome to America Can We Talk. I'm Debbie-Georgatos. You can see, I think I am not in my studio in Dallas. I'm down actually in Houston, Texas for the Texas GOP convention. And just getting, it's really actually the couple of days of lead-in before the convention starts. Real convention starts Thursday with their meetings, all sorts of things this week. So I'm down here for that. And today on our show, we're going to talk about a film I finally watched called Not Without My Daughter. I will tease that in the beginning, and then we're going to turn to talking with my friend Ammon Blair from the Texas Public Policy Foundation. He joins us to talk about U.S. cartels, the food supply, and the screwworm in Texas. We're going to talk about Henry Nowak's death in the UK and what it means for America's future. And then Texas grapples with facing Islamic conquest, tied to the here today in the Republican Party of Texas convention and for a long time to come, governing politics in Texas and all around America. And I will try at the end to tell you why these stories matter to you. And I thank you so much for tuning in to America Can We Talk. So my quick opening kind of first five today. I watched a film over the last few days that I had someone recommend to me. I mean, numerous people recommended, and I finally had the chance to see it, called Not Without My Daughter. And I can't urge you strongly enough to watch this film, because right now what we're dealing with, not just in Texas, but all over America, but especially in Texas, is a massive influx, not only of Islamic immigrants, but Islamic people who are more engaged in the push to impose Sharia, Islamic law, on America's culture, society, and laws. So it's a very, very top issue for this time politically in Texas and in America. And the reason I mention this film, again, Not Without My Daughter, has Sally Fields in it. And the short story is she plays this lovely American woman who's married a doctor who in America, who is Iranian by background, grew up in Iran. He came to America to go to medical school, practice medicine. And when the film opens, they have a young girl, a daughter, who's 4 years old, I think. And they're just a happy married couple living in whatever it was, New Hampshire, Connecticut, someplace in New England, and great relationship with Sally Field's parents, but the husband's from Iran. And the story of the film is that the husband, is being contacted regularly by his family in Iran and asking him to come back and visit, to stay with them. And he's tempted to do this because he's a medical very ill. So of course, in the movie, he convinces her to go over to Iran. He tells her it's for a 2-week visit. Yeah, or something, 10 years. Please come. He talks to her over there and realizes very shortly after arrival there that her husband tricked her, that he wanted her, the daughter, to live there, to become Iranian, and she wants to leave. And she has a choice, hence the name of the film, Not Without My Daughter. She's leaving divorcing him, leaving without the daughter, or staying. And the reason I want to recommend this film to you so highly is it is a true story. It's not just a story of one woman's life. But as they revealed at the end, this actually happened to an American woman who went over there with her husband, thinking they were there for a 2-week visit, and literally being I see my videos frozen. I'm sorry. I'm glad you hear my voice anyway. I can't explain these things. But the reason I think this matters so much is it's a true story. The woman comes back, and she, at the end of the film, they tell you that she actually has and been engaged since the time of this event. She leaves with her daughter and without her husband. And what she is trying to do now is raise awareness for the, as she says, literally thousands of American women in a similar situation in Iran, brought back to Iran by a husband who grew up there. They believe they're going to visit, didn't know they're going to live, and they can't get out. And the reason I want this to stress is we're going to turn this later in the program today, but it's important to understand it, just get a real visual of what really life was and really what it's like today. Not while they're at war, it's probably even worse now, but what life is like when Islamic culture dominates, when Sharia dominates. It's important for Americans to have this picture as we grapple with the questions in America about this growing quest to force Sharia, force Islamic law in America, to force the Islamization of Texas, the Islamization of America, for us to be able to see a little bit ahead of time where it could be headed if we don't handle this correctly now. As part of my theme and all the speaking I do a lot of public speaking on this topic. I dedicate show topics to make the point that America has to understand what the threat is of this push for Islamization so that we can actually counter it. Again, I'm going to apologize. If you're watching this show, apparently my video is on and off. I don't know how to fix that. I'm in a hotel near the convention center in Houston. I think this is probably the best we can do. I hope you can hear me. So with that, that's my short introduction. We'll probably turn to those themes later. But turning to the next topic today, I have joining us a gentleman who's joined us in the past. He's just a stellar scholar, a thinker. His name is Ammon Blair, and he is with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And he has been speaking, testifying, writing about what is occurring in Texas right now with what a bug, I don't know what you call this, a screwworm. It's a worm, but the new screwworm is apparently very serious things infecting Texas cattle. And the reason I want to tell you about that is that it's become significant enough that our governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, declared a disaster over this issue. He issued a disaster proclamation a few days ago this month, about what the screwworm is doing. And this Ammon Blair has been an expert on food supply and issues of that nature. So to have him join about it. And so welcome to the show, Ammon Blair.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Ammon, thank you. Maybe because you're actually not frozen. I'm glad to see that. I'm sorry that our camera's been so our connection has been so fuzzy. But in any case, welcome to the show, Ammon. I'm glad you're here. And I want to ask you, your title, you're Senior Fellow at Texas Public Policy Foundation for a Secure and Sovereign Nation Initiative. Great title. But I know you've testified recently in the Texas State Senate about this screwworm. And without a lot of deep biological data that I won't be able to follow, can you tell us essentially, and I read Governor Abbott's proclamation too, so he recounts this is not a new problem, but kind of why are we seeing a flare up in Texas, and how serious is it?
Sure. Well, once again, thank you for having me. I'll just start, I guess, from the beginning. The New World screwworm is a parasitic fly that's extremely dangerous to livestock and really any warm-blooded animal. We did have it before, and it's now made a comeback. So this is what it actually does. The female fly lays her eggs in any open wound on any warm-blooded animal: cattle, horses, wildlife, dogs, people. There are over 2,000 cases right now of people right now in Mexico and Central America. Once the eggs hatch, the larvae, or basically maggots, burrow into the living flesh and start eating it from the inside. they have these little spines on their bodies that help them dig deeper, and which is why they called a screw worm. If it's
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Yep.
go ahead. I didn't know that's where the name came from. Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
And so if it's not treated quickly, the animal can die from the massive tissue damage and infection. It is one of the most destructive parasites livestock or any animal can get. So the scary part is how fast it spreads. One infected animal can lead to hundreds more because the flies are attracted to the wounds, and they're attracted to that scent. In the past, this parasite was kind of a really huge problem across the southern United States, here in Texas, and also in Mexico. We actually eradicated it from the US and most of Central America decades ago, using sterile male flies. And what we did is we released millions of sterile male flies so they to mate with the females so they could not reproduce. And that's how we had to eradicate it back then. But it's back. It reappeared. The first case was in Panama in 2021. Now, if you remember, we were able to push it all the way back past the Darien Gap. Now, if your audience remembers what the Darien Gap is, that is, of course, the area that all the illegal aliens, the millions of people that made their way into the United States, went through. Now, we had measures to contain the screwworm at the Darien Gap, but it was breached when millions of illegal aliens came in through that region. So Panama first had their first cases, about 5 or 6 cases in 2021. And then it started to spread. And at that time period, even before then, the Mexican cartels actually traffic the cattle, Central American cattle, through Central America all the way up into Mexico. And if you remember back in the day under the Biden administration, the cartels would create fake family units, if you guys remember, through either they had the illegal aliens ditch their documents, or they created fake documents, fake families. So that way they could get their product. Unfortunately, human beings to them are a product. So they could get their commodity from past the border into the interior. Well, cartels are doing the same thing with cattle. They're having false veterinary documents, false documents claiming that the cattle are actually Mexican cattle. They're also falsifying in purchasing ear tags. And so what this does is it allows roughly about 800,000 head of cattle per year to enter into the cattle industry, the legal cattle industry in Mexico. They'll enter their feedlots. They'll enter the processing center if they're going to process them there in Mexico, and then export them into the U.S., or they're going to ship them all the way north into feedlots for live cattle trade into the United States. So we technically don't really know where these cattle come from. We don't know their history, how they've been raised. We don't know what diseases they have other than screwworm as well, foot and mouth disease, you name it. And so for countries who typically don't trade with us, or may be sanctioned, or may have tariffs, say like Nicaragua, right? They're a communist country. That country or those countries need to make money. So just like Iran and just like other countries that are in this type of criminal market, they have to also obtain their GDP through the criminal marketplace. And so that is why we are seeing the prevalence of cartel or illicit trafficking of the cattle industry inside of Mexico. And that's why the numbers are so high. To think 800,000 head a year of cattle into Mexico. And so this is not just onesies and twosies. This is not just hundreds. This is hundreds of thousands. So they've created a parallel illegal cattle industry into Mexico, and then forward into the United States.
Okay, I must confess to you that my audio went out, or I mean, it went out. So I've kind of read everything you said. I just want to, I'm glad you're so knowledgeable about this, and I'm glad you're tying in, because when people heard this announcement from Governor Abbott, I think there was just a thought of, oh, this is a naturally occurring thing, oh, dang, they're back, kind of like mosquito season or something. But actually, you're pointing to other causes for the spread of this New World screwworm, tied to the cartels, tied to human trafficking, tied to cattle and cartels. And so, I mean, I know you testified before the Texas Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. I think you were trying in that hearing to let them know it's a bigger problem than just a naturally occurring thing that has made its way to America again. That to really address it, we have to address the cartels and also this human trafficking and cattle trafficking. So, I mean, when you testify there, because I know Texas Public Policy Foundation is just revered in Texas as a source of policy solutions. So did you present something to the Texas State Senate saying, here are the steps we have to take in order to really deal with this time?
Yes, ma'am. We've been working with not only the Senate and House committee. We've been working with Nathan Sheets as well, who just won that primary to be the ag commissioner. We've been working with a few congressmen and women, as well as those within the USDA. The issue that I wanted to raise is that regardless, no matter what we do now, no matter what biosecurity measures we have in place, no matter how many sterile flies that we do, unless we stop the illicit trafficking of illegal aliens through the Darien Gap in that region, or the illicit trafficking of cattle and any livestock to Mexico, it is going to be very difficult and almost impossible to stop the spread. And therefore, this is far surpassed what the capacity and capability that the U.S. Department of Agriculture can do. We must now rely on other federal agencies, to include the State Department and the Department of War. A lot of the narco ranches in the trafficking, like I said, there's Honduras, Nicaragua, very vast lands, as well as Guatemala. Right now, the Department of War is currently inside of Guatemala. We are conducting joint operations or advise and assist operations against cartels in Guatemala. My request when I testified and what I wanted to get out there is that the Department of War must see the cartels as more than just drug trafficking organizations. They must see them as more than just moving human beings. They need to realize that Mexico, it has the #1 criminal marketplace in the entire world. That is not our data. That is done by the Global Index. They are the 3rd in terms of criminality in the world. And it's all controlled by the Mexican cartels. Therefore, in order to counter the cartels, as we just created the American Counter Cartel Coalition with 17 other nations, in order to counter them, we must counter every single one of their enterprises. And this being one of the largest and most money-making enterprise is agriculture, specifically cattle. And so it would be my ask, now that they're doing advise and assist in joint operations with Guatemala, is to completely sever and dismantle, disrupt, and defeat every one of these trafficking, smuggling corridors that is leading from Guatemala into Chiapas, Mexico. And the cattle organization inside of Mexico asked for this very thing from the Mexican government a year ago, July of 2025. They asked for the Army and for the National Guard of Mexico to go after and counter all the illicit smuggling coming into Mexico that is now going into their feedlots and going into their systems, because they don't want their cattle tainted either. It's going to decimate their feedlots as well. However, Mexico did not do it. We cannot rely on Mexico to actually protect their own citizens, let alone our interests and our own sovereignty. They do not act like our ally. Therefore, we must work with those who have signed an agreement, the American Counter Cartel Coalition, and to completely dismantle every one of these corridors that is coming in here. If we do not, And if we continue to think that this is just an agriculture issue instead of a national security one, then we're just going to continue to set our federal agencies, the USDA and Texas in our leadership, to failure.
I thank you for your work. Really is making these broader connections and bringing in the interested parties. I had to ask you one thing back to you said a couple minutes ago that the Mexican group of Mexican cattle owners had approached the government and asked them to take action in July of 2025. Do you think the Mexican government is just so controlled by the cartels they're unable to fight them? Is that what really is the case, or are they just unwilling? What's the reason?
Yes, ma'am. So they're unwilling. The Mexican cartels, if you look back, they started controlling at the subnational level in the late 80s, early 90s. They started taking over a lot of the agriculture industry during that time period. Due to federal policies, a lot of the farmers and ranchers in the early 90s were not receiving loans or anything else like that to grow, especially in Michoacan and Jalisco. Now, and what happened, because it was over next to a port at that same time, if you remember, that's when the cocaine trade shifted from the Caribbean into Mexico as well. And so the cocaine trade created massive drug trafficking organizations, now the cartels, and where they had expendable amounts of cash. So to the farmers, they're like, we're going to get our loans and everything else like that from the Mexican cartels. This started happening at the same time where the PRI, the one-party rule, started losing its control over the subnational level. And so the cartels at that time period started becoming an insurgency, offering to the local population a socioeconomic means of continuing to produce what they wanted to produce. And that's when the cartels started controlling at the subnational level, not just drugs, not just agriculture, but every facet of society. And then they just worked their way up from mafia type organizations to drug trafficking organizations to an insurgency to foreign terrorist organizations, and now parallel government at the local all the way up to the top, where they don't just corrupt, or coerce. They are now parts of the government themselves. And so, yes, we are seeing, regardless of what happens, regardless of the complaints and the pleas from the Mexican people themselves to the federal government is not going to do anything. And we see this time and time again. Why should us as a nation have to tell another nation to secure its own people? If we are having to tell another nation to go after foreign terrorist organizations inside their own country, that's a problem. We shouldn't have to. That must mean that there's complete collusion, or they are completely in bed within their own political system itself.
So, Ammon, honestly, I feel like we could spend a couple hours going through all these topics because, ultimately, at least naively, people hope there's a government in every, nation state, every sovereign country that is either elected or in some way chosen by the people, or you recognize it's not. It's like Islamic countries, it's just a tyrannical people ruling. But in Mexico, I mean, people have often talked about the cartels are violent, they're dangerous, the government doesn't dare and try to stop them in any way. But you're really kind of saying the cartels are the government, and the government is powerless. So you do get around to, as America, and this, as I say, gets off on too many other tangents, but as America, our job number one is to make sure our citizens and our cattle and our food supply are safe, and that we are doing everything we can to stop trafficking over our borders. But this is I can sort of say it's a multi-agency issue. Back to the New World Screwworm, it's a multi-agency issue, and it's very complex in Mexico. So I'm so glad you dove into it, and I want to write down. You said there was a creation of a number of nations that created a counter-cartel organization. Is that what you called it?
Yes, ma'am. The Department of War came up with the America's Counter Cartel Coalition. It was a coalition of original 17 countries that signed an agreement with us, kind of like the Monroe Doctrine or Monroe Doctrine, right, to secure the Western Hemisphere from the cartels. Because there's multiple cartels. It's not just Mexican cartels. You have Cartel of the Suns in Venezuela or Tren de Aragua, right? You have cartels in Colombia. You have cartels uh, throughout this whole Western Hemisphere. And so the Trump administration sees this as the greatest threat to the Western Hemisphere. It's like we need to eradicate them. You see them in the Caribbean, taking them out in the Caribbean. And so we just need to have the Department of War recognize and realize that the cartels are not just trafficking drugs in people, but also many of the things that we rely upon: oil, food, auto parts. Look at the current agreement we have, the US, Mexico, and Canada agreement, the USMCA, which is being negotiated right now, and look at the top 10 commodities. Then look at how many of those top 10 commodities the cartels actually have either control over or extort for money and taxes. And it's almost all of them. And then in terms of agriculture, they almost control the entire trade. And what's hard for me is, and we talked about food supply, I think the time before that I was on your show, is if RFK just flipped the food pyramid, right? Where we are now supposed to eat meat and vegetables, right? And grains are at the bottom, right? To be healthy. Well, where do we get a majority of our fruits and vegetables? And we have to import them because we don't grow them. And so now what we have done, now that the whole landscape has changed in Mexico, that the cartels have such a grapple on that industry, we are now trading with foreign terrorist organizations and now are dependent upon foreign terrorist organizations to feed ourselves. And so that's why it's it's a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional approach to counter this problem. It's not just a simple, we're going to put out sterile flies and it will be done. No, this is going to take every single effort from our federal government as well as other governments, Guatemala, Central America, South America, to completely eradicate our threat to secure their food security as well as ours.
Ammon, Blair, I mean, honestly, I say this like every time I ever talk to you. I'm so grateful for your tenacity and research and the depth of your research, and you're pulling all the pieces together and connecting dots. You do it on many issues, and it's just an extraordinary gift you have, and also just a very hardworking work ethic to research, figure it out, put it all together. So I really the reason I had wanted to reach out today was because I saw that Governor Abbott, our Texas State Governor Abbott, had seen this as a serious enough issue to issue this proclamation, which he just called New World Screwworm Disaster Proclamation in June. But as you describe it now, and I'm glad to have our listeners understand, it is far more complex than trying to get rid of the screwworm in cattle in Texas. It's a much bigger issue, and really one that is going to require learned people and people rightly motivated in America, in Texas, in America, and governments, as you're saying, throughout Central and South America, to all decide we've got to free ourselves from the control of the cartels, which for most people, it just seemed like, well, they're really rotten. They're kind of like gangs in Los Angeles that run prostitution rings, or gangs that run, that bring guns in or something. We see them in that kind of American, big city gang mindset. But these cartels are businesses every bit as competitive with, with American business and business around the world as we can possibly imagine. So I can't say that you solved the problem today, but I do want to thank you for the detail and complexity. And just so people can follow your research, how do they find you online?
Sure. Just you can follow me on Twitter at Ammon S. Blair, and then you can go to texaspolicy.com and follow any of our work. We just wrote a piece about Mexico, the cartels, and the screwworm. It should be hitting Fox News here pretty soon.
Just great. And Ammon Blair, I thank you. And again, and on Twitter, it's at Ammon, Ammon. And then it's just Blair, Blair, at Ammon Blair.
Ammon S for Samuel. My middle name's Samuel. So Ammon S. Blair.
Okay. Ammon S. Blair, Blair. Honestly, people, you'll learn so much. I do follow him. I just didn't have it memorized. But in any case, Ammon, thank you. We could talk about so much more, but I want to try to hit other amazing stories today. So thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man, for having me.
Okay, my friends, I was going to tell you right before the show started today, we had a news story break in Texas. Many of you may have followed the story of the The most unfortunate stabbing of a Texas high school student last year. The event occurred basically about a year ago, and there was a trial that ended today. The jury came back today, and this was in the death of a high school student at a track meet. And stabbed to death by another student from a different school. And the person who was prosecuted, Carmela, and I want to just tell you, I get his name, I don't want to say it incorrectly, but Carmelo Anthony. And you know what? I'm going to quick. So I'm working with a less than perfect situation here because I'm in a hotel. Okay, yeah. Trial update. Okay, yes. Carmelo Anthony, Karmelo Anthony, and he was found by a jury to have been guilty of murder in stabbing to death a fellow high schooler, Austin Metcalf, at a high school track meet. This actually happened in the county where I live, in Collin County. Obviously deeply upsetting. It was basically a year ago right now, and obviously a lot of tumult. It was the defendant who was accused and now found guilty is Black. The student who was murdered, who happens to be a twin, had a twin brother right there with him. And this stabbing occurred at a track meet, and there was all sorts of media attention around the trial, claiming that there was racism involved, that either in the incident or what had led up to the incident. And so this was a trial closely followed by many people in Texas, and it ties into a lot of what I want, it kind of ties into things I want to talk about in America right now. But in any case, he was found guilty. He is not, because of his age, there's not going to be a death penalty consideration. I did read a bit about the sentencing rules in Texas for a minor, and the basic story is that he cannot get life without parole. He can get a life sentence, but with a parole potential, and it depends on the precision of what the jury found, which charges, but it could be that's a 25-year sentence, which for him would be cut back from a life sentence. But what was really, really troubling about this case to so many people was that it was these are supposedly the good kids. These are kids who are at a track meet, they're playing sports in high school, and they are they're competing, which you always wanted kids to do. And as it turned out, Carmelo Anthony wasn't supposed to be at the track meet that day, was supposed to be at school, didn't really have a legitimate reason, especially for being in the area where he was, because as these track meets, what they do, they divide the schools into tented areas. So basically, because track meets are kind of odd. They're not like you have two teams on both sides of the field, and so you have, someone's on one side, one's on the other side, but there's a lot of people, a lot of different events that go on. So they set up tents for students to stay together with their own team and have, the equipment there, and I assume water and whatever they need, snacks, whatever they receive. So this incident that occurred at that track meet had got immediate attention right away from a lot of national media sources, and some who were trying to instantly claim that somehow there had been a racial component of this, that the young man who was killed, Austin Metcalf, was had said something inappropriate, said something derogatory. It did not appear that was ever shown. Obviously, I wasn't there. I wasn't on the jury. I didn't go to the trial. But the one video that was available for everyone to see did not show the kind of altercation that people had claimed had occurred to lead this incident. So obviously, just a horrific incident for this young man and for his, I didn't actually, this is not Henry Nowak's death. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mackenzie. I'm doing a story I didn't send to you because a jury verdict just came out right before we came on air. But this jury verdict was the finding guilty of Carmelo Anthony of the murder of a fellow high school student, or another high school student, Austin Metcalf, at a high school track meet. The Collin County jury rejected this self-defense claim, which there wasn't, and the self-defense claim, it was a stabbed right in the heart. There was no other knife around, no other weapon around. So that story it's tragic. It's really tragic for all the families involved, most obviously, especially Austin Metcalf's family, friends, the whole community. So, but anyway, that trial has ended. And I felt like since the news came out just as we started today, I wanted to share it. Now I want to turn to Mackenzie. I'm sorry, I should have quick sent you a text. Mackenzie's my producer, who's doing this long distance, and just I appreciate very much that we're doing this show while I'm traveling. But the story I did want to turn to now is Henry Nowak's death and America's future. And on that segment of the show, Henry Nowak's death and America's future, probably everyone listening to this show knows these facts, but the short story is there was a British citizen of the UK, who was 18 years old, and this past December was murdered by a gentleman who was another British citizen. And the short story was why it's so tragic, why it has gained international attention, why there are protests still going on in Australia and around the world, were the set of facts. That short story was Henry Nowak was a college student, a first-year college student, studying, and he's coming home from where he was, and he encountered another British citizen who was Sikh, S-I-K-H, Sikh, and that man was carrying knives that traditionally Sikhs will carry with them as I don't know if it's custom or religious practice, but in any case, there was some conversation between them, and this gentleman, the Sikh gentleman, named, I'm going to tell you his name in a moment here. Anyway, he was arrested, charged, but he stabbed to death. The Sikh gentleman stabbed to death Henry Nowak, an 18-year-old. So they managed, as actually the stabber's brother is one that calls the police, the UK police. They come there. This young man, Henry Nowak, 18 years old, has been stabbed. He's bleeding. He's saying to the police, help me. I've been stabbed. I've been stabbed. He's telling them I've been stabbed. I can't breathe. And the police listened to the Sikh gentleman, the stabber, who said that he was, that this young man had called him some name. Here it is. I'm sorry, it took me a moment here. This is difficult working from a different, not with my usual studio. The gentleman who was now convicted of stabbing to death Henry Nowak is named Vikram Digwa. He was only 23 years old, and Vikram Digwa had a knife with him, which Sikhs carry ceremonial daggers. That's part of their faith, or they claim it's part of their faith. So this Vikram Digwa, his own brother, calls the police, said, someone's been stabbed. The police get there. This young man, he's bleeding, and he's telling them, I'm bleeding. Please help me. I can't breathe. And the stabber says, the 23-year-old stabber, Vikram Digwa, claims to the police, well, this kid, Henry Nowak, made racial slur. He said something, offensive to me. So the police actually arrest and they handcuff the victim who's bleeding to death. You hear one of them say there's a video, by the way, of what occurred, but the victim who's been stabbed is handcuffed, and while he's handcuffed on the ground, he's bleeding out. And the police were saying there was some comment by one officer, I don't see any bleeding, I don't see anything. So short story is the victim who was stabbed died of the stab wounds, bled to death. Police believing the story that he said something racially offensive to this Vikram Digwa, a British Sikh. And so the story is gathering a lot of steam for a number of reasons, in part because I say one more fact, is most astonishing fact. This was videoed. The actual attack was videoed, apparently by the stabber himself, videoed. And when the police, when they get to court, the judge is trying this guy, Vikram Digwa, 23 years old. He's on trial, and the court ruled that the stabbing and the death of this young man, of Henry Nowak, cannot be played for the jury. The jury can't see this because it's too disturbing. the jury can't see what actually happened because it's too disturbing. So this, this Vikram Digwa did end up getting convicted, and he's gone off a long prison sentence. I don't know if he got life in prison, but he got a long time in prison. And he and so he did at least get convicted. But part of what has caused so much international reaction to this story is that in British society, and frankly, throughout the Western world, this rise of wokeism, of leftist mindset, that there's always and forever a racial component to everything in life, and always a presumption that racism is involved in everything. So the police are so tuned into this, so afraid of not believing Vikram Digwa when he says, oh, he called me, he said, something racist to me, that they actually can't look at the guy who's been stabbed, realize they better try to help him and get him to a hospital. Now, I read a bunch of commentary later, and they're saying that no matter what had happened, even if the police believed this young man, he was so badly injured by the multiple stab wounds, badly injured by this British Sikh guy, that he would not have survived anyway. I don't know if they can know that, but that's what they're saying. But what's really stirring people up is this idea that we have allowed our cultural judgment, our police officers' presumptions of what's occurring, our assumptions about society in the UK, in America, and other Western cultures to be that, well, there probably was something racist about this, probably because the victim is white, he must have done something wrong. He must have deserved this. And probably because this British Sikh guy said, well, he said something offensive to me, that the reaction of the UK police is, well, we better just handcuff this guy. Handcuff him because he allegedly, offended somebody. So that's the first point, is that our cultural, this wokeism spewing out of left-wing thought around the world makes people almost paralyzed into being unable to think, unable to reason, unable to use rational judgment, to immediately believe, which, as it turns out, the incident was videoed, and apparently there was no racial slur made. That was ever that could be proven. No racial slur at all. So you had a young man, 18 years of age, in college. In fact, I'm sorry, Mackenzie, you're being very helpful here. I do want to put up, we have a couple of things I want to show you about this. In clip one, we just have a tweet that was put out by Vice President Vance. And I want to just tell you quick words. Henry Nowak died the same way a civilization dies, abandoned, handcuffed by the authorities who neither trusted nor cared for him, and accused of hate crimes he did not commit. His murder is as tragic as it was enraging. He should still be alive today, and he would be if the last few generations of European elites had stood their ground against the politics of self-hatred and the mass invasion of migrants, many of whom despise the West and the people who love it. That was a quote. That was a tweet that I wanted to read you, just that portion of it. That's a tweet by Vice President Vance. And I will tell you that a member of parliament responded to that tweet. So Vance is over there realizing that this poor man, young man, 18 years old, loses his life because he's stabbed by someone who's been welcomed into British culture and obviously willing to be violent for apparently no reason, or because he finds the presence of white people offensive. I don't know what his reason was, but it was it was an opportunity for people like Vice President Vance and others to talk about the preservation of Western culture. And I realize I'm treading into things that people can easily say, oh, you're racist. Everybody Western has to be Caucasian. That's not what I'm saying at all. Not what I'm saying at all. I think that throughout Western Europe and in the United States of America and many countries in the world, we have multicultural countries. We have people in our countries, as long as they agree to accept our laws, follow our customs, our laws, our system of governance, we welcome people of different race, ethnicity, national origin, skin color, because we don't have any purely, and no one is trying to seek a nation that is all of one color. But what we have throughout the, especially Islamic immigration into Western Europe, into UK, into America, we've had a constant pummeling by the anti-American left, the anti-American Democrat Party, to portray America as a deeply racist country, to see racism under every rock, to accuse people of racism if they're because they won't agree with your opinion. And it's gotten to where even the police, when Vice President Vance's comment there, even the police in the UK were unable to think clearly, unable to rationally assess the situation. They heard, well, someone said something that seemed racist, and so they handcuff someone who's bleeding to death. And so there are protests around the world, and I know these are tender topics, and I know that it's easier for podcasts and talk show hosts to talk about tax rates or things that are more palatable to be debated. But these are real, this is a civilizational hang on to your country and point out how much anti-human, anti-Western, evil, dark thought has captured our society, captured our police, captured our courts, to where this was so that was J.D. Vance's clip about it. I also want to put up, this is clip 2, also, Mackenzie, if you can quick put up clip 2. This is just a tweet. This was a tweet put out by the Telegraph, which is a British paper. As Henry Nowak lay bleeding to death in the middle of a quiet residential street in Southampton, his wrists were chained together in handcuffs. Police officers, who he thought were coming to his aid, had fallen for the lies of his attacker, Vikram Digwa, 23-year-old Sikh man, who claimed the 18-year-old finance student had racially abused him. Digwa had in fact stabbed Mr. Nowak 4 times with an 8-inch ceremonial knife. So you can go back to me. I want to make another point about this. I don't like any racial terms. I don't use racial terms. I don't think in racial terms. I don't accuse others of racism. But even if this young man had done that, even if he said something he shouldn't have said, if he said something that the Sikh man found offensive, the idea that the response of this British citizen Sikh, even if the things, which apparently was a lie, but even if they had been said, he stabs to death an 18-year-old British citizen, stabs him 4 times and kills him. And this, my friends, is an outrageous reaction, even if there were racial statements made, which apparently there were not. But it's really important to understand that this is another reason this case so enrages people, is because we've allowed our societies to be contorted into just, pure hysteria is justified over, and I'm not advocating racist use of racist language. I don't use it myself. I don't use racist terms. I actually don't hear hardly anyone ever use racist terms. It just isn't how people speak. But that has caught the American people kind of short, caught them on, get them to thinking what is happening to our culture. And I want to tell you one more thing, but before I turn to the other story, which I do still want to get to today, I want to get to talking about our how Texas is grappling with and facing Islamic conquest. But one more story about how loony our endless deference are, because we're going to have, we have to have inclusion. We have to all, we have to, whatever people say they want because their religion, we have to give in to them. I'll tell you the most amazing story. So I'm going to find Hopkinton, Hopkinton, Hopkinton Public Schools in Massachusetts now have a policy that carves out specific religious exemption to its strict no weapons rule. So Sikh students, S-I-K-H, Sikh students can carry their knives to school, a ceremonial knife known as a kirpan, on school grounds, while all other students are prohibited from knives, guns, replicas, and other weapons for every other student. But because a Sikh, I guess, community told the school, well, our young people have to carry a knife. Now, the knives that they're allowed to carry, the knife that killed Henry Nowak, the Sikh knife that killed Henry Nowak, was 8 inches long. 8 inches long. And so I don't know how long these knives are that kids are being allowed to bring to school, but the idea in our country that we're so, we're so preposterously differential to someone saying that all other kids, because of public safety, can't bring weapons to school, but because your religion says you have to carry a weapon, okay, you can carry it. It's preposterous, just preposterous. It's not just, illogical or unjustified. It's another sign of surrender, of undue deference to religious demands and undue deference to minority religions, and some sense that, this is a reasonable request being made. They say they need this. Okay, fine. Which ties well into my last topic for today, which is Texas grappling with facing Islamic conquest. Okay, so I told you today at the start of the show, and again, I realize I've been freezing in and out in the show, which, we're doing the best we can. I'm in a hotel in Houston for the Republican State Convention. But part of what's the Texas Convention is going to be dealing with is what to include both in our platform and our legislative priorities, because we in Texas, our state Republican Executive Committee creates legislative priorities through a process that delegates participate in. They create legislative priorities, and they take those priorities when our state House and Senate are back in session, which is only 6 months every other year. But our state Republican Executive Committee takes those priorities to the Texas legislature, and they work with the legislators, encouraging them to pass these things. They're essentially giving voice to the people of Texas. The Republican voters of Texas elect people to go to represent them in the state Republican Executive Committee, and that committee takes, we see it as legislative priorities, and work with them to get them into the legislators' minds, and hopefully get them into getting bills passed. And the reason I'm saying all that is a big, big issue in Texas right now is we have, as you've been hearing on this show, many others, we have an issue of an aggressive Islamic conquest mindset. Islamic conquest is my term for it. When you come to America and you want to bring Islamic law and you want to make America in any way agree to it, honor it, treat it as though it's a matter of diversity and inclusion. If you want to change America's culture and society into honoring Islamic law, that's part of Islamic conquest. I'm gonna, sorry, I have to give myself a glass of water here. I do have a great clip on I want to play this clip for you because it really helps to capture what's happening, not just in Texas, but around the world. This is clip 3, and this is our U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, talking about Islam. If you could quick play, because he's talking about how serious a threat of Islamic conquest is in America. And go ahead, please, and play that.
All radical Islamic movements in the world identify the West writ large, but the United States in particular, as the greatest evil on the earth. And every chance they have, the notion that somehow radical Islam would be comfortable with simply controlling some province in Iraq or Syria is just not borne out by history. Radical Islam has shown that their desire is not simply to occupy one part of the world and be happy with their own little caliphate. They want to expand. It's revolutionary in its nature. It seeks to expand and control more territories and more people. And radical Islam has designs openly on the West. On the United States, on Europe, we've seen that progress there as well. And they are prepared to conduct acts of terrorism. In the case of Iran, nation-state actions, assassinations, murders, you name it, whatever it takes for them to gain their influence and ultimately their domination of different cultures and societies. That's a clear and imminent threat to the world and to the broader West, but especially to the United States, who they identify as the chief source of evil on the planet. Okay, the reason why they hate the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the leadership of the UAE, of Bahrain, is because they've allowed the United States to partner with them. That's why they hate them. They consider them infidels for it. They hate Israel. But they also hate America. And they hate anywhere in the world that we have influence, they seek to attack it, including here in the homeland. If you look at the domestic terrorists, at the attacks that have happened here domestically, the overwhelming majority of them have been inspired by radical Islamic viewpoints. And that includes the shooting in the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. That includes the Saudi pilot in Pensacola, my home state, 2 attacks. All radical.
Okay, okay, my friends. Challenging here in this hotel room. My Zoom keeps cutting off. And anyway, well, I want to play that by Marco Rubio. This is extremely consequential, is a great sign to see such a senior member of the Trump administration, of our current president's administration, openly saying that we in America need to be alert to the fact that there is a massive global conquest, an Islamic conquest underway, and it's happening around the world, and it's happening in America. And I wanted to play that because I'm very grateful. I think that Secretary of State Rubio has been doing a fabulous job. And I think that the dawning awareness at the presidential level, and I know that is occurring, and with Secretary Rubio, that there's a very, very legitimate, serious danger that we face as a country because Islamic conquest, and I'm going to say it, I've said it many times on the show before, Islamic conquest is woven into the DNA of Islam. It is why for 1400 years there has been Islamic conquest around this globe. Many, many formerly Christian countries are now Islamic countries because they were conquered through violent, brutal, deadly, barbaric conquest. And what we're watching in America right now, it's peaceful, but it is ongoing Islamic conquest. It's just part of the DNA of Islam. And it's happened in part because I'm kind of tying stories together from today's show. It's happened in part because we in America have switched our preferences, our ideas about what kind of immigration should occur to America. So I'm grateful he was talking about that. And Marco Rubio, is saying, he calls it radical Islam. It's just Islam. It's not radical Islam. It's just Islam. It is political Islam. They're not satisfied with just having a Middle East caliphate where Islamic law, Sharia governs everywhere. It is incumbent on devout Muslims to engage in jihad for the purpose of conquering everyone, the entire world, conquering them and bringing them under a caliphate. That is the point of what the jihad is that we're seeing in America today. So I want to, other clips, I want to run out, but I want to share there was a quick clip by Congressman Brandon Gill. He is a congressman from Texas, and this is clip 4. If you can quick play, if you have that, and go right ahead and play it, please.
You are going to see more communities like what you see in the DFW area, where Islam as a political movement gains far more viability, and it starts at the local level, where you'll see large Islamic immigration into certain communities, certain towns. They'll start to donate to local mayors and local city officials. That'll give them the ability to get mosques and Islamic schools zoned properly so they can build them. It goes from there. You start to build the sort of the physical infrastructure needed for an Islamic movement. And we're already getting there. I mean, you see the results in Europe where you've got no-go zones in certain parts of Paris and London. And the results have been catastrophic for the people of Paris and London. And I think we could either ignore that at our own peril, or we can see what's happening other places and stop it.
Okay, folks, you know what? This is I'm very sorry the show's been intermittent today because it's frustrating as all get out not to have the Zoom connection, the Wi-Fi stay strong as it should in this lovely hotel. But there is one more clip, and the reason I'm playing these are we're going to be doing many more shows on this in the coming weeks and months. If America does not wake up and recognize that what is happening in Texas is not radical Islam and a few minor people who maybe extremists engaged in things that maybe aren't quite right. If we can't get beyond that, if we can't figure out that what we are watching in Texas and watching in America is slow rolling Islamic conquest of our country and the point and the determination to push Sharia in our country, if we don't wake up, we're going to end up like Western Europe, where they have in large part surrendered to Islam. They can't get their countries back. They can't get their countries back under control. Part of what Congressman Brandon Gill has been talking about is our own immigration policy enabled this to happen here. It isn't just that Islamic conquest increased, it's that our own immigration policy enabled it. And so here's one more clip. This is clip 5, Congressman Brandon Gill again talking about this issue.
We didn't have to deal with Islamic terrorist attacks in the U.S. 50 years ago. So why are we dealing with this now? Why is there sort of an upsurge in anti-Semitism and pro-Islamic sentiment and terrorist attacks in the U.S., and it's because we've imported these people into our country. That's just a reality, and really in just the past couple of decades, that's why we're dealing with this. And that policy to bring large-scale Islamic immigration into American communities is something that Washington did. I mean, we allowed this to happen as a result of our immigration policy.
Okay, I'm about out of time today. I do want to make a couple points in wrapping up today. I do this show to try to talk about preserving America. That's why I've always done it. I've been doing it for 11 years. And actually, it's coming up in 12 years. And it is entirely for the purpose of trying to talk about preserving America and understanding America's unique and extraordinary greatness. And in part, doing that is to do that, you need to expose what are the threats to America's very, very freedom, to our culture, to our Constitution, to the freedom of this country. And I am very willing to talk about the hard issues. I don't just talk about, tax policy and speed limit law or something. I talk about the serious threats facing America. And one of the most serious threats is not just that the Islamization of America is underway. It's not just that there is a Islamic conquest happening right before our eyes. It is that the political correctness that the lunatic woke movement has brought to America and places around the world has blinded our capacity to see it, to recognize it, to categorize it. So you can't, so we're so cautious and careful not to offend. And the worst thing of all is to offend someone in their feelings rather than to preserve our society. We are literally in the middle of Islamic conquest in the state of Texas. So here at this Republican convention and in my shows, my upcoming speeches, and many activities I'm involved in, I'm going to continue talking about this because part of what, if you see jihad, because like we had on 9/11 and they kill a bunch of people, everyone understands, wow, that's terrible. We don't want jihad here. We have to understand jihad is a duty of devout Muslims. They must engage in it. And if it doesn't all have to be violent. It can be just like what we're seeing in Texas, the push to honor Sharia, to allow Sharia courts, to accommodate Islamic culture and have Islamic holidays. And if this were, and Sharia is the enforcement arm of Islamic conquest. It really is, it's the enforcement arm. So the more we agree that Sharia, and Sharia, understand Sharia is Islamic law, encompasses everything, every aspect of human life. It is the law in many countries. It's an all-encompassing governing system. It is utterly inconsistent with the American Constitution. They cannot meld. We cannot make them work together. We can't find, common ground. There is no common ground. You have freedom in America and the American Constitution and freedom of speech and freedom of religion and the free society and constitutional governance, or you surrender to Sharia and you end up with being governed by whatever the imams of the day say that Sharia means for you. You absolutely lose all of your freedom. There's no middle ground. That's why at the beginning of the show, I urge you to go watch the film, Not Without My Daughter. Understand, look at what life is like under Islamic law. Understand America should be strong enough to say, and every politician, Republican or Democrat, ought to be able to say, we will never be an Islamic country. And recognize that just as though if you had Hitler slowly invading and taking more and more countries away, and pretty soon they realize, hey, wait a minute, we got to stop this guy because he's ultimately after complete conquest of the world. In the same way Sharia functions, they may not say we're imposing Sharia tomorrow. What they're saying is piece by piece by piece by piece, you surrender. You give in to what we say should be, you correspond to what we want. You let us have no-go zones. You let us have no-go zones where we live as only Muslims allowed, and we follow Sharia there, and we're going to continue Islamic culture and practice that is utterly inconsistent with America's freedoms. It really is. It's not just, it's a cultural clash that must be recognized, and it must be recognized soon, and by the majority of American citizens and by the government in every aspect, every level of government. They need to understand that we have to stand up for America as a freedom-loving, constitution-based Declaration of Independence promise country, and that we will not surrender any of it. And so why I do this show, to speak up for America, is to uncover the really deep issues that sometimes people don't know are there. This is one of them. This Islamic conquest, it will end up being, it needs to be a deciding issue in the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential election, and for a long time to come, because ultimately what you want is the people who are deeply engaged in this pushing of Sharia, this Islamic conquest, realize America will not surrender. America will not give in to us. America will not submit to Islam, will not submit to Allah, and they've got to go live in some other country. If that's what they want to live under, it can't be here in America. We have to be that firm and that absolute. And anything less than that endangers our future freedom. I had a lot more to talk about today. We had a disrupted show because of the unfortunate Wi-Fi situation, but I want to share with you one last thing, and then I'm going to put it up on our website. I'm going to put it on our Facebook page. There's a fabulous article at American Greatness called "The Shell Game and America's Institutional Enemy Inside Our Gates." It lays out for people who don't see the big picture yet, or don't connect the dots, how extremely vital and important it is to recognize this threat and to begin to encounter it as a nation, to come together as Americans and say, we love our Constitution, we love our Judeo-Christian culture, we love our freedom, we love our Declaration of Independence, we love our country enough, we're never going to surrender in the slightest, in any degree, to Sharia or the Islamization of America. We're going to stand for what America is. We, the American people, are going to stand up for our country. I'm past my time, I know. My name, again, is Debbie-Georgatos. The show is called America Can We Talk. Please follow me on Twitter at @DebbieCanWeTalk. And also online, the show is on americacanwetalk.org and .com. Very important to check out our website, check out our Twitter feed, follow us, get engaged in this fight to speak up and stand up for America. I'm Debbie-Georgatos. I do the show to speak truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
Like a crashing wave. Can you hear us now?
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you